Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that this is First Nations territory that we're in. And I thank the First Nations for taking care of this land for all those thousands of years. You know, it's hard to recognize when something historic is happening. When Ferdinand was assassinated, nobody said, oh, gee, this is the beginning of World War I. But you all know, I think, that you're part of a great turning, a fundamental shift in the way that we live on this planet. Part of what's driving it is rising oil prices and peak oil. Part of it is our health that's being impacted by pollution. And part of it is a growing awareness of a new environmental understanding.
Energy. This lady's parasol has 1 1/2 horsepower of sunshine continually poured on it, enough to run her washing machine, sewing machine, refrigerator, and vacuum cleaner. In full sunlight, our family car receives almost enough sun power to run it, if we only knew how to use solar energy directly. At the common rate of 2 cents per kilowatt hour, the sun sends the Earth $1 billion worth of energy every second. And it's coming to us free. 5 minutes worth would pay our national debt. 1 minute's worth of the energy that hits the Earth would pay the total annual income tax of all United States citizens. Oh, a happy day.
And yet what the Earth receives is only a minute fraction of the whole. Only 1 part in 2 billion of the total solar energy. The rest of the 500,000 billion horsepower goes out into space.
Today we confront an ecological crisis far beyond Pearl Harbor or Sputnik, and we have to respond appropriately. And what Sputnik showed was that once a challenge is met, totally unexpected opportunities and discoveries will come along and confront us. And that's what we've got to do, is make that commitment to meeting this major challenge. The root cause, I believe, of our problems is the way that we look at the world, our perception of our place on the planet. In the late 1980s, the British Columbia government gave a company, Fletcher Challenge, a logging company with headquarters in New Zealand, the right to log a valley called the Stein Valley. And the Lil'wat natives and the Lytton Indian band decided this was their sacred ground. They did not want logging, and they asked me to join with them in fighting against the logging of their valley. And on one occasion, I flew in a helicopter with Chief Ruby Dunstan up the Stein Valley, and as she looked down, she pointed out the sacred burial sites of her people. She pointed out where a great battle had been made with the Lilwat people 150 years ago. She pointed out the spawning bed of the salmon and where they pick berries in the spring. And when we landed, when the helicopter landed, the pilot got out and he said, last week I took some politicians and company executives up this same valley, and all they talked about was cubic meters of wood, jobs, and profit. Two groups of people looking down on the same valley and seeing fundamentally different things. I went to Peru with the anthropologist Wade Davis a few years ago. He took me to a village on the side of a mountain where the children are taught that that mountain is an apu. Apu means God. And they believe that as long as that apu casts its shadow on their village, it will determine their entire fate. Think how those children treat that mountain, believing it's an apu, compared to children in Trail, British Columbia, who are taught all their life those mountains are filled with gold. We treat the world the way that we see the world. Is a forest a sacred grove, or is it just timber and pulp? Is a river the veins of the land or potential for irrigation and energy? Is a species our biological relatives, or simply a resource? Is the ground, is the soil a community of organisms, or just dirt? The way we see the world shapes the way we treat it. But what we can do is approach nature with greater humility. Nature has existed for 4 billion years. And during that time, nature has had to deal with the same problems we have. Where do you get your food? How do you reproduce? How do you keep from being eaten? What do you do when you get sick? What do you do with your waste? Maybe if we look to nature for how nature has solved these problems, we'd have a better chance of not screwing up the works with our powerful technology.
Our food is grown by a natural process called photosynthesis, which means putting together with light. Your light, the oldest, biggest, and most important manufacturing operation in the world. 99% of all our food and fuel is created by photosynthesis, a process that goes on only in plants, never in animals. On every green leaf, there are millions of submicroscopic little one-man factories turning out more sugar than all the ships and railroads in the world could carry. And the head man of each factory is a little green molecule called chlorophyll, the only engineer with the know-how about this still secret life process. Chlorophyll is so small and so secretive that not even the most powerful microscopes can spy on him.
Janine Benyus calls this biomimicry. And maybe that ought to suffuse the way that we do things, and I believe that the wind power and renewable energy is a part of that whole process of biomimicry.
There's exciting research going on with some brand new ways.
You think Mr. Chlorophyll was pretty smart with his tricky sunshine cake that makes food out of your sunlight? Well, the science boys have come up with a sunshine cake that makes electricity out of your sunlight.
Oh, yes. You mean the solar battery?
Yeah.
That's hardly even a cookie yet, let alone a cake.
Doc, that's big news.
Well, the solar battery. Now, held in the sun, this thin little cell, a sunshine wafer we might call it, produces a usable amount of electric current out of the sunlight that falls on it.
You know, although this is quite expensive at the moment, the simplicity of this sunshine wafer is startling. Well, bake one for old Glory Puss, Doc.
I'd be delighted.
Well, get him. Old pastry cook research.
The recipe for this solar wafer sounds just like a vacation. Just sand and sunshine. Thank you, son. Plain old sand is composed of silicon and oxygen. Its Sunday go-to-meeting name is silicon dioxide. Separate out the oxygen and the bits of seaweed, bottle tops, and other odds and ends, and we have left a metal, silicon. But our silicon must be pure silicon. So we purify it until it's as pure as the driven snow. Slice off a razor-thin wafer. Put the wafer into the oven, Fill oven with a boron gas and bake to white heat. And the boron cooks into the surface, forms an extremely thin icing over the wafer. Remove finished wafer. Connect one wire from electric motor to boron icing and the other wire to the wafer itself. Expose wafer to sunlight. Presto! The motor starts running with the efficiency of an automobile, and nothing is used up but the sunshine, which is free.
And the brain did something absolutely unique. It invented an idea called the future. Future doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is now and what we can remember from the past. But because we invented the idea of a future, we are the only animal that realized we can affect the future by what we do today. If we look ahead, we can see where the dangers lie. We can see where the opportunities are. And we can deliberately choose today to avoid the dangers and exploit the opportunities. Foresight, I believe, was the great breakthrough of our species that gave us a leg up. And it was our foresight that enabled us to achieve this place of dominance on the planet today. But now we have to ask, what is the collective impact of all 6.7 billion human beings on Earth? We've never had to do this before. And it's very, very difficult. But we have no choice. We've got to sit down and do that. Because now scientists and engineers and computers are acting in the great tradition of human thought. They're looking ahead. They're seeing where the dangers lie and the opportunities are. And for over 40 years, they've been telling us we're heading down a very dangerous path. That there are opportunities in wind, in solar, and all of these other areas. But that the way we're going is very dangerous. And now we are turning our backs on the very survival strategy of our species. We say we can't afford it, it'll ruin the economy, and all these other arguments. And I'm sorry I don't have the time, but let me just say that a critical issue that confronts us is that we have now put the economy as the source of everything that matters, that it's our highest priority. And this is what is driving us along this destructive path. You see, economics and ecology come from the same root word, eco, from the Greek word oikos, meaning home. Ecology is the study of home. Economics is the management of home. Ecologists try to find the conditions and the principles that allow life to flourish and survive. Now, I would have thought any group of people would say, before I do whatever I do, I'm going to go to those ecologists and say, gee, what are the principles and conditions so that I don't conflict with those conditions and principles that allow us to survive and flourish. But no, we've elevated economics above ecology. And you hear it from Mr. Bush, you hear it from Mr. Harper, you hear it from Mr. Stelmach. They're all saying, oh, well, we've got to do something about climate change, but we can't do anything that will jeopardize the economy. The economy has been elevated up above everything else. And that economic, and that's what you're all operating under. Why has wind had such terrible trouble getting traction and expanding? The economics has really retarded you, and that's why the standard offer contract has been so powerful. As we've learned from Germany, it works. But still, I would say we're operating within a paradigm that is heavily weighted against what you're doing. Why is that? Well, for one thing, we don't properly account for everything. You see, what nature does is considered an externality. I didn't know this was an economic term, but an externality means it's not included in the equation. Now, when we were fighting for the Stein Valley that I mentioned earlier, I went camping up in the valley, and when I came out with my family, I encountered the CEO of Fletcher Challenge. The company that was going to log it. It was turned into a park. We won, by the way. But anyway, we came out. I met the CEO. We got into a discussion which turned into a shouting match. And finally he said, listen, Suzuki, are tree huggers like you willing to pay so we don't cut those trees down? Because if you're not willing to pay for that, they don't have any value until someone cuts them down. And I went, oh my God, he's absolutely right. In our economic system, Those trees in the valley are taking carbon dioxide out of the air, putting oxygen back into it. Not a bad service for animals like us. That's an externality. So all of the things that nature does for us for nothing is by economists considered an externality. And that's why we don't care what happens to the atmosphere, because it's free. And in Canada, we're not willing to pay for what we put into the atmosphere.